Tab 1. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. You know, when I look out at this audience, I see faces that have lived through decades of economic ups and downs, people who've worked hard, saved diligently, and now you're facing what should be the golden years of your life. But here's the thing, and I'm going to be brutally honest with you tonight. I've seen too many people, too many good people, make critical mistakes in these years that literally wipe out everything they've worked for. Over 60, 4 worst money mistakes that can wipe out your savings, and 4 things you absolutely must do now. That's what we're here to talk about tonight, and I promise you, by the time we're done, you're going to have a completely different perspective on how to protect and grow your wealth in these crucial years. My name is, well, you know who I am. I've been investing for over 4 decades now. Started on Wall Street in 1982, right out of Harvard Business School. I've managed billions, I've seen markets crash and soar, and I've had the privilege of advising some of the wealthiest families in America. But more importantly for tonight's conversation, I've also seen what happens when people get it wrong, catastrophically wrong. Just last month, I had a 67-year-old gentleman come into my office. Let's call him Robert. Robert had done everything right, or so he thought. He'd maxed out his 401k for 30 years. He owned his home outright, had a nice pension from IBM. On paper, he should have been set, should have been living comfortably. But Robert made 2 critical mistakes, just 2, and in 18 months, he'd lost over 60% of his retirement savings. 60%. Now, you might be thinking, well, the market's been volatile. Yes, it has. But Robert's losses had nothing to do with market volatility. They had everything to do with the mistakes I'm going to share with you tonight. Mistakes that are so common, so seductive, that I see them repeated over and over and over again. You see, when you're over 60, when you're in or approaching retirement, the rules change. The investing principles that served you well in your 30s, 40s, even 50s, they don't just become less effective, they become dangerous. Dangerous in ways that can destroy decades of careful planning in a matter of months. So let's start with the worst mistake, the one that kills me every time I see it, because it's so preventable and yet so devastatingly common. Mistake number 1, chasing yield in all the wrong places. Chasing yield. Now, I understand the temptation, I really do. Interest rates have been historically low for years. Your CDs are paying practically nothing, your savings account is basically a joke. So what do? You start looking for higher yields, and that's when the vultures swoop in. I was having dinner with Charlie Munger. This was about 3 years ago before he passed, and Charlie told me something that's stuck with me ever since. He said, "You know what the most expensive words in investing are? This time is different, and guaranteed high yield." Charlie was 99 years old when he said that, and he'd seen every scam, every scheme, every too-good-to-be-true investment opportunity you can imagine. But here's what happens. You get a call, or maybe you see an ad, or maybe your neighbor Bob tells you about this fantastic investment that's paying 8, 10, 12% guaranteed. Guaranteed. And your brain starts doing the math. If I put my $300,000 retirement savings into something paying 10%, that's $30,000 a year. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Except there's no such thing as a guaranteed high yield. There isn't. If someone is promising you 8, 10, 12% guaranteed returns in today's interest rate environment, they are either lying to you or they're about to lose your money, or both. I've seen this happen with REITs, real estate investment trusts, where people don't understand the underlying risks. I've seen it with high-yield bond funds where people don't realize they're essentially lending money to companies that are one step away from bankruptcy. I've seen it with structured products, with annuities that have more hidden fees than a carnival funhouse has mirrors. Just 2 years ago, I had a client, let's call her Margaret. She was 72, a retired school principal. Very smart woman, very careful with money her whole life. She got pitched on something called a principal-protected note by her bank. Her bank. The bank told her it was guaranteed to return her principal and would pay based on the performance of the S&P 500, but with a minimum return of 6% annually. Sounds good, right? Principal protected, minimum 6%. What they didn't explain clearly, and this is where the fine print becomes your enemy, was that the bank had the right to call the note early if interest rates changed, that there were caps on the upside. that the fees were buried so deep in the prospectus that you'd need a forensic accountant to find them. Margaret put $200,000 into this product. The bank called the note after 14 months. She got her principal back minus fees, and she'd earned less than she would have in a savings account. But worse than that, she'd tied up $200,000 for over a year in a product that was basically designed to benefit the bank, not her. This is what I mean by chasing yield in the wrong places. When you're over 60, when you're relying on your savings to generate income, the temptation to reach for yield becomes almost irresistible. But every percentage point above what the market is naturally offering comes with risk. Every single percentage point. Now, mistake number 2, and this one is perhaps even more insidious because it feels so responsible, so conservative. Mistake number 2, being too conservative and getting killed by inflation. Wait, that sounds contradictory to what I just said, doesn't it? First I tell you not to chase yield, then I tell you not to be too conservative. But here's the thing about being over 60. You're walking a tightrope. On one side, you've got the risk of losing money to bad investments. On the other side, you've got the risk of your money losing purchasing power to inflation. I learned this lesson personally, and it was a painful one. My own father, God rest his soul, was a Depression-era kid. Born in 1925, lived through the crash, lived through rationing, lived through uncertainty. So when he retired in 1990, what did he do? He put everything, and I mean everything, into CDs and government bonds. Safe as houses, he used to say. Can't lose money if it's guaranteed by the US government. Mathematically, he was right. He never lost a dollar of principal. But you know what happened? Over the next 25 years, inflation averaged about 2.5% annually. His safe investments were paying 3, sometimes 4%. Sounds okay, right? He was staying ahead of inflation, except taxes. Federal taxes, state taxes. After taxes, his real return was maybe 1%, sometimes less. Meanwhile, the cost of everything, healthcare, food, utilities, the things he actually needed to buy with his money, was going up by 2, 3, 4% a year. By the time my father passed away in 2015, his purchasing power had been cut. Nearly in half. Nearly in half. He had more dollars than when he started, but those dollars bought less than half of what they could buy when he retired. This is the insidious nature of inflation. It's like a slow leak in your tire. You don't notice it day to day, but over time it deflates your wealth. And when you're over 60, you don't have 30 or 40 years to recover. You don't have the luxury of time to make up for purchasing power that's been lost to inflation. I see this mistake constantly. People get so focused on not losing money that they guarantee they'll lose purchasing power. They think they're being conservative, but they're actually taking one of the biggest risks of all. The risk that their money won't be worth anything by the time they need it most. And here's what makes it worse. Healthcare costs. Healthcare costs in retirement inflate faster than general inflation. Much faster. While general inflation might run 2 or 3%, healthcare costs for seniors often inflate at 5, 6, 7% annually. So if you're earning 2% on your safe investments, and healthcare, which is likely to be your biggest expense in retirement, is inflating at 6%, you're falling behind by 4% every single year. I had a client, beautiful woman named Dorothy. She was 75 when I met her. Dorothy had been widowed for 5 years, and her late husband had left her with what seemed like a substantial nest egg, about $800,000, but he'd put it all in CDs and treasury bonds. Safe investments. When Dorothy came to see me, she was panicking. Her healthcare costs had tripled in 5 years, tripled. Her long-term care insurance premiums had doubled. Her property taxes had gone up 40%, and her safe investments were earning less than 2%. She was watching her purchasing power evaporate in real time. The money was still there, every dollar her husband had left her, but it was buying less and less every month. She was literally getting poorer, while her account balance stayed the same. This brings us to mistake number 3, and this one absolutely breaks my heart because it often involves family. Mistake number 3, mixing your retirement security with family finances. Now, I want to be clear here. I'm not saying don't help your family. I'm not saying don't be generous with your children or grandchildren. What I'm saying is that your retirement security, and your family's financial needs are two different things, and you cannot afford to confuse them. I've seen this play out in so many tragic ways. Adult children who've lost jobs, who are facing foreclosure, who need help with medical bills, and mom or dad, with their big hearts and their retirement accounts, step in to help. They take money out of their 401k, they reverse mortgage their house, they co-sign loans they can't afford. Just last year, I had a couple come to see me, Tom and Linda. They were both 68, had been retired for 3 years. They'd done a beautiful job saving for retirement, had about $1.2 million between their various accounts. Should have been set for life. But their daughter had gotten divorced and she was struggling. She had 2 kids. She'd lost the house in the divorce. She couldn't make ends meet. So Tom and Linda did what any loving parents would do. They helped. They took $200,000 out of their retirement accounts to help their daughter buy a new house. Then their son's business failed. Another $100,000 to help him avoid bankruptcy. Then their grandson needed help with college tuition. Another $80,000. In less than 2 years, Tom and Linda had given away nearly 1/3 of their retirement savings. Nearly 1/3. And here's the kicker. None of it was being paid back. Their children loved them, appreciated them, but the money was gone. Now Tom and Linda are 70. Their expenses are going up, and they've got $380,000 less than they need for a secure retirement. They can't ungive that money. They can't undo those withdrawals. And worst of all, they're too proud and too loving to ask their children to pay it back. This is what I mean by mixing your retirement security with family finances. Your retirement money isn't extra money. It's not discretionary money. It's the money that's going to keep you fed and housed and healthy for the next 20 or 30 years of your life. I always tell my clients, put your own oxygen mask on first. You've heard that on airplanes, right? In the event of cabin pressure loss, put your own oxygen mask on before helping others. Same principle applies to retirement finances. If you become a financial burden to your family because you gave away your retirement security trying to help them, you haven't helped anyone. You've just created a bigger problem. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. But it's my money. I should be able to do whatever I want with it. And legally, you're absolutely right. But practically, emotionally, financially, when you're over 60, every dollar you give away is a dollar that's not going to be there when you need it most. Warren Buffett, and I've had dinner with Warren several times over the years. Warren has a saying, "Someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago." But the reverse is also true. If you cut down the tree you planted, if you give away the money you saved, there won't be any shade when you need it. Which brings us to mistake number 4, the final mistake. And this one is perhaps the most painful because it often comes disguised as wisdom. Mistake number 4, falling for financial scams designed specifically for seniors. Now you might think, I'm too smart for that. I'd never fall for a scam. But here's the thing. The scams targeting seniors today are sophisticated, they're personalized, and they're run by people who understand exactly how to exploit the psychological vulnerabilities that come with aging. I learned about this firsthand through a client of mine, a brilliant man named Dr. Harrison. Dr. Harrison was a retired surgeon, Harvard Medical School, one of the smartest people I've ever met. This man had performed heart surgery for 40 years. His hands had literally held people's hearts. Dr. Harrison got a call from someone claiming to be from the Social Security Administration. They had his Social Security number, they knew his wife's name, they knew his address. They told him there had been suspicious activity on his Social Security account, that his benefits were at risk, that he needed to verify his identity to protect his account. Now, Dr. Harrison was 81 years old at the time. His hearing wasn't what it used to be. He was on several medications that affected his thinking, and frankly, he was scared. The idea of losing his Social Security benefits terrified him, so he gave them information, bank account numbers, passwords, verification codes. Within 48 hours, they had stolen $340,000 from his accounts. $340,000. When Dr. Harrison called me, he was devastated, not just because of the money, though that was certainly devastating, but because he felt foolish. This brilliant man, this surgeon who had saved lives, felt like he'd been made a fool of. But here's what I told him, and here's what I want you all to understand. These scams are designed by professionals, people who study psychology, who understand how the aging brain works, who know exactly which buttons to push to create fear and urgency. They know that as we age, we become more trusting. They know that we're more likely to be isolated, more likely to be dealing with health issues that affect our judgment. They know that we're worried about our financial security, and they use that worry against us. The romance scams are particularly cruel. I've seen widows lose hundreds of thousands of dollars to men they've never met, men who spend months building emotional relationships through email and phone calls, men who eventually ask for money for fake emergencies. The investment scams are getting more sophisticated too. They're not just promising guaranteed returns anymore. They're using artificial intelligence to create fake websites, fake testimonials, fake regulatory approvals. They're sending official-looking documents. They're using financial terminology correctly. They're making it almost impossible to distinguish the fake from the real. Just 6 months ago, I had a client show me a prospectus for an investment that promised modest returns, 6% annually, backed by U.S. Treasury derivatives. The document looked completely legitimate. It had SEC filing numbers, it had legal disclaimers, it had charts and graphs and footnotes. It was completely fake, every word of it. But it was so convincing that even I had to do some serious research to prove it was fraudulent. This is what you're up against. These aren't the obvious scams of the past, the Nigerian princes and the lottery winnings. These are sophisticated, targeted attacks designed specifically to separate seniors from their life savings. So those are the 4 worst mistakes: chasing yield in the wrong places, being too conservative and losing to inflation, mixing your retirement security with family finances, and falling for sophisticated scams. Each one of these mistakes can wipe out decades of careful saving. And the cruel irony is that they often come disguised as responsible, caring, or smart financial decisions. Now, let me tell you the 4 things you absolutely must do to protect and grow your wealth after 60. These aren't suggestions, they're not recommendations, they're requirements if you want to maintain your financial independence and security. The first thing you must do, and this is non-negotiable, is create what I call a sleep well at night foundation. This is money that you absolutely cannot afford to lose. Money that must be there no matter what happens to the stock market, the bond market, or the economy. For most people over 60, this foundation should represent about 2 to 3 years worth of living expenses, kept in absolutely safe, liquid investments, high-yield savings accounts, treasury bills, short-term CDs. Yes, these investments might barely keep pace with inflation, but that's not their job. Their job is to be there, guaranteed, when you need them. I call this your financial bedrock. And just like the bedrock under a building, you don't want it to move. You don't want it to be exciting. You want it to be boring and reliable and absolutely, completely safe. I learned this lesson from David Swensen, who managed Yale's endowment for decades. David used to say, "The best investment is the one that lets you sleep at night." And when you're over 60, sleep is more important than yield. This foundation serves multiple purposes. First, it gives you peace of mind. When the stock market drops 20%, and it will, you'll know that you can pay your bills for the next 2 or 3 years regardless. Second, it prevents you from making emotional decisions with the rest of your money. When you know your immediate needs are covered, you can take appropriate risks with your growth investments without panicking. Third, and this is crucial, it protects you from sequence of returns risk. That's a fancy way of saying that if you have to sell investments when they're down to pay your bills, you lock in those losses permanently. But if you have 2 or 3 years of expenses in safe investments, you never have to sell your growth investments at the worst possible time. The second thing you must do is embrace what I call intelligent diversification. Not the old-fashioned diversification your grandfather practiced. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Intelligent diversification that's specifically designed for the realities of being over 60. This means you need some growth investments. Yes, even at 60 plus, you need growth. because you're probably going to live another 20 or 30 years, and you need your money to grow faster than inflation. But it also means you need income investments that can provide cash flow without forcing you to sell your growth investments. I typically recommend what's called a barbell approach. Conservative, safe investments on one end, your Sleep Well at Night Foundation. Growth investments on the other end, stocks, real estate, inflation-protected securities, and very little in the middle ground that gives you neither safety nor growth. The mistake most people make is putting everything in the middle ground. Moderate risk, moderate return investments that don't provide the safety you need for peace of mind or the growth you need to stay ahead of inflation. Let me give you a concrete example. I have a client, Ellen. She's 73. Ellen has $600,000 in retirement savings. Here's how we've structured it. $150,000, about 2.5 years of her expenses, in high-yield savings and short-term treasury bills. This is her foundation, her Sleep Well at Night money. $300,000 in a diversified portfolio of low-cost index funds, about 60% stocks, 40% bonds. This is her growth engine, designed to stay ahead of inflation over the long term. $150,000 in what I call income generators, dividend-paying stocks, REITs, inflation-protected bonds. These provide her with cash flow so she doesn't have to sell her growth investments to pay her bills. This isn't the only way to do it, but it illustrates the principle. Safety for peace of mind, growth for long-term purchasing power, and income for current cash flow needs. The third thing you must do, and this is where most people fail, is develop what I call scam immunity. You need to become absolutely, completely resistant to financial fraud and manipulation. Sleep Well at Night Foundation. Growth investments on the other end, stocks, real estate, inflation-protected securities, and very little in the middle ground that gives you neither safety nor growth. The mistake most people make is putting everything in the middle ground. Moderate risk, moderate return investments that don't provide the safety you need for peace of mind or the growth you need to stay ahead of inflation. Let me give you a concrete example. I have a client, Ellen. She's 73. Ellen has $600,000 in retirement savings. Here's how we've structured it. $150,000, about 2.5 years of her expenses, in high-yield savings and short-term treasury bills. This is her foundation, her Sleep Well at Night money. $300,000 in a diversified portfolio of low-cost index funds, about 60% stocks, 40% bonds. This is her growth engine, designed to stay ahead of inflation over the long term on major financial decisions. I tell all my clients, if you're ever tempted to make a financial decision without consulting me first, that's exactly when you need to consult me most. The decisions that feel urgent, that feel like they can't wait, those are almost always the wrong decisions. Fourth, you understand that your cognitive abilities may change as you age, and you plan for that possibility. This isn't pleasant to think about, but it's reality. Aging affects judgment, and scammers know this and exploit it. Consider setting up what's called a trusted contact with your financial institutions. This is someone they can call if they notice unusual activity on your accounts. Consider giving a power of attorney to someone you trust completely. Consider setting up automatic safeguards that prevent large withdrawals or transfers without additional verification. I know this seems like you're giving up control, but actually, you're maintaining control by planning for the possibility that your judgment might be compromised in the future. The fourth and final thing you must do is create multiple streams of retirement income. Multiple streams. This is perhaps the most important concept I can share with you tonight. You cannot rely on a single source of income in retirement. You can't rely just on Social Security. You can't rely just on your 401k. You can't rely just on your pension if you're lucky enough to have one. You need multiple streams because if one stream dries up, you're not left high and dry. Here's what I recommend as the foundation of retirement income streams. Stream number 1, Social Security. For most people, this should be delayed as long as possible up to age 70, because every year you delay, your benefits increase by about 8%. 8% guaranteed, adjusted for inflation for the rest of your life. Stream number 2, your retirement accounts, 401k, IRA, 403b. But here's the key. You withdraw from these accounts strategically, not just when you need money. Some years you might withdraw more, some years less, depending on tax rates and market conditions. Stream number 3, taxable investment accounts. Money you've saved outside of retirement accounts, invested in dividend-paying stocks, bonds, REITs. This money gives you flexibility because it's not subject to required minimum distribution rules. Stream number 4, part-time work or consulting. I know you're retired, but many of my most successful retired clients work 10 or 15 hours a week doing something they enjoy. Not because they have to, but because it provides income, social interaction, and purpose. Stream number 5, real estate. This could be rental property, it could be a reverse mortgage on your home, it could be downsizing and investing the difference. Real estate, properly managed, can provide both income and inflation protection. The goal is that no single stream represents more than about 40% of your total income. That way, if one stream is disrupted, if Social Security benefits are cut, if the stock market crashes, if your rental property is vacant, you're not in crisis. Let me tell you about my client Richard. Richard is 76, retired from General Electric 8 years ago. When Richard first came to see me, he was worried. He had a decent pension from GE, but he'd seen what happened to other companies' pensions, and he wasn't sure his would be there forever. So we worked together to create 5 income streams. His GE pension was about 35% of his income. Social Security, which he delayed until 70, was another 30%. His 401k distributions were about 20%. He had a small rental property that provided 10%, and he did some part-time consulting that provided the final 5%. Last year, GE announced they were freezing pension payments for some retirees. Richard wasn't affected, but if he had been, he would have lost only 35% of his income, not 90 or 100%. The multiple streams protected him. This is what I mean by income stream diversification. It's not just about diversifying your investments, it's about diversifying your income sources so that you're not dependent on any single one. Now let me wrap this up by talking about something that's often overlooked, but absolutely critical: the psychology of money after 60. Money means something different when you're over 60 than it did when you were 30 or 40. When you were younger, money was about opportunity, about building, about accumulating. When you're over 60, money becomes about security, about independence, about maintaining dignity. This psychological shift is natural and healthy, but it can also lead to mistakes if you don't understand it. The fear of running out of money can cause you to make decisions, like chasing high yields or being too conservative, that actually increase the risk of running out of money. I've seen people so afraid of losing money that they kept everything in CDs earning 2%, while inflation ran at 3%. They never lost a dollar nominally, but they lost purchasing power every single year. I've seen people so afraid of being a burden to their children that they fell for scams promising guaranteed returns. They were trying to grow their money to ensure their independence, but they lost their independence by losing their money. The key is to find the balance between prudence and paralysis, between caution and timidity. You need to take appropriate risks to preserve your purchasing power, but you need to avoid inappropriate risks that could wipe you out. This is why the 4 principles I've shared tonight are so important. The Sleep Well at Night Foundation gives you security. Intelligent diversification gives you growth. Scam immunity protects you from fraud. Multiple income streams protect you from single points of failure. Together, these 4 principles create what I call a robust retirement portfolio, one that can withstand market volatility, inflation, sequence of returns risk, and even cognitive changes that might come with aging. But here's the most important thing I want you to remember from tonight. It's not too late. I don't care if you're 65, 75, or 85. It's not too late to implement these principles. It's not too late to protect and grow your wealth. I have clients who didn't start working with me until they were in their 80s, and we were still able to significantly improve their financial security. The key is to start now, today, with whatever you have. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You might not be able to implement all 4 principles perfectly, but implementing them imperfectly is infinitely better than not implementing them at all. Your future self, the person you'll be at 75, 80, 85, is counting on the decisions you make today. Make them wisely, make them thoughtfully, and make them with the knowledge that your financial independence and dignity depend on getting this right. Thank you for your attention tonight. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you'll take these principles to heart. Your retirement security is too important to leave to chance. Remember, avoid chasing yield in the wrong places. Don't be so conservative that inflation destroys your purchasing power. Keep your retirement security separate from family finances and protect yourself from scams. Then build your Sleep Well at Night foundation, diversify intelligently, develop scam immunity, and create multiple income streams. Do these things, and you'll sleep better, live better, and maintain your independence and dignity for decades to come. Thank you, and good night.